In today's video, we're going to create a damage number effect that we're going to be able to call globally and easily use to pop up damage numbers from any enemy when they take damage. Hi, my name is Michael. Welcome to my 2D action and adventure RPG tutorial series. Follow along and learn how to create your own ARPG in Godot 4 using GD script. Hey everybody, and welcome to today's video. So for this episode in the Action RPG tutorial series, we're going to be building a damage number effect. And for those of you who haven't been following the series, I know that episode number can be intimidating, but you can follow this particular tutorial without really relying on much else in the project. So if you just want to follow this and figure out how we're going to add damage numbers and you've got your own enemies or system that you want to apply it to, then this should be easy to follow. So what we're going to do is we're going to build first a scene that displays the damage number. It's just going to be kind of like an animated number that we can dynamically change what the number displays. And then we'll create a global effect manager. Now this global effect manager is going to be an autoload script, and we're going to use it to control and trigger these damage numbers. And then in the future, if you want to add other effects to this script, like the ability to spawn like a smoke effect or dust effect, which is basically a smoke effect. Come on, let's be more creative, but any kind of particle effect, right? You could do that from the script and it'll be simple to implement. And then lastly, we'll tie our new effect together by taking our enemy script and making it trigger this damage number whenever the enemy takes damage. Okay, so let's begin by setting up some things. And I'm going to go to my globals folder. And if you don't have one, you can create something like this. But this is where I just put all of my scripts that are auto-loaded. So I'm going to come in here and I'm going to add a new folder actually, specifically to house some of this damage effect stuff. So I'll just call this folder global effects. So then any global effect that I want to use in the future, I'll probably create it and stick it in this folder. And in here, I'm going to create a new scene and we'll call this damage text. That's going to be the effect. And yeah, 2D scene I think is good. Okay, so we've got this damage text scene and it's a 2D scene. And what I want to do is I'm simply going to add a label. And let's just put some placeholder text. I'll put 99 as if we did 99 damage. And I just want to now configure this for how I want the damage text to look in the game. And I'm going to take this label. I'm going to first come down here to the alignment settings. For the horizontal alignment, I want it to be centered. And then I'm just going to drag this so that it's centered just like that over the origin of my scene. And then I want to just change the appearance a little bit. So I've got a good font I want to use. I want this to be a small font and my game is pixel art. So let's come down here to fonts and I'm just going to go down here and quick load a font that I want. And I've got this M5X7 that I always love to use for small text. And the only other thing I really want to do is just kind of adjust how this appears with a little bit of a drop shadow. So I'm going to, under the theme overrides for colors, I'm going to select the font shadow. And then for the constants, I'm going to select the shadow offsets. Or actually, maybe just the X, just like that. So we've got a little faint drop shadow. That's going to help my text stand out, especially if it's on a light background. Okay, because we don't know where this is going to appear. It's going to pop up all over in our game. So I'm going to go ahead and save that. And that's all we're going to do to set up this scene aside from a script. So let's create a script for this global effect. And we can actually just come up here to our root node damage text, right click and select attach script, and it'll give it a name and everything. I do want to give this a class name though. And I'm just going to call it damage text. And there we go. So we've got this script. What does this script need to do and why am I attaching a script here? So I want the damage numbers to like pop up and animate out of the enemy's head or the player, whoever shows it, right? And we could do that with an animation player, but I want there to be some randomization to this. And I also want this script to be responsible for getting rid of the damage numbers once the animation is finished playing so that it's really modular and easy to use. You know, I don't want the enemy to have to worry about that or the player, whoever displays damage text. I just want them to be able to send a message like, hey, I received this much damage, and then everything else happens, you know, automatically. So this script is going to handle the animation and the destroying or the queue free of this node. Okay. So when we look at the script, I want to be able to give this kind of some randomness to how it travels. So I want a variable that I can use to kind of control and give kind of the base maybe ranges for this. So I'm going to create a vector 2 that I'm going to call travel distance. And by default, let's go ahead and set this to something. And so we're going to have an X and a Y component to this. So the X is going to control kind of the max and min distance that this could move the numbers, right? So it could be randomly left or right a little bit. So I'm going to give it a value of 10. And then for the Y, this is going to control the distance that it travels on the Y axis. I'm going to give it a negative 20. Negative because negative is up on the Y when we're working on our 2D game. Okay. So that's this variable I'm going to use. And then I'm going to have just one function. It's going to be called start. And what this function needs is I need to be able to set the value of the text. So I'm going to make that an argument. We can begin with that. We'll just call it, we could call it text. We could call it value. I'll call it text, I guess. That's a string. And then we need a position where this damage number will start, you know, where it should appear. So a position, which will be a vector 2. And then I guess that's about it, right? We can just go with this. So there's our little function. And then in here, we're going to do all the magic. This function is going to handle everything from the positioning and then animating this damage text, as well as the destroy that we talked about, okay? So the first thing we can do is just simply set the, I'll say the global position to the position that we pass in, okay? And then we also want to set our, maybe I should do this first actually, but this label, I'm going to go ahead and grab this and drag it in here. I'm not going to make an on-ready variable to track this label because we're only going to access it once. So we're just going to set the text equal to the text that we pass into the start function here. Okay, so that's going to set up our label and the position of this node. And then what do we need to do? We need to animate the node, and then eventually we need to free the node so that it's not just hanging around for forever, right? And in order to animate this node, I think one of the easiest and most straightforward ways would be to use a tween, but we also want some randomness to this animation. So let's address the randomness first. What I want to do is I want to take our travel distances and I want to give it a random height and a random kind of X travel path. And so what we can do is we can kind of multiply our vector by a random number to help give us that randomness. And so I'm going to say that our travel range, let's take our travel distance dot Y, for example. So this will control the height. I'm going to multiply this by a random number. So I'm going to say times equals, not 8, but times equals random F range, just like this down here. This will allow us to give a random float and it allows us to select a range. So we're going to say from and to, and I just want to start at about half. So 0.5, meaning that it could be anywhere from half to, I'll say 1.5 of this value. So that means it could be 10, it could be 30, right? And it'll stay negative. Okay, so we're just going to multiply that. And then we'll do the same thing for the X. We'll say travel distance dot X times equals random F range. And then for the X, this is different because we want, right now our X is a positive 10, but we want to be able to make it negative as well. And so I'm going to say we have a negative 1.5 to maybe a positive 1.5. So that means our travel range could get as large as 15 and as low as negative 15. Otherwise, it's going to fit somewhere in there. And then you can, of course, adjust either these random values here or the values up here to kind of help give you the effect that you want if you want to make it move a little bit differently. And then I think lastly, we'll make the duration of this number be a little bit different because it's going to stick around for a certain amount of time. And I don't want it to last much longer than a second normally. So let's create a variable for this. We'll just call it the duration. And this will be a float. And then this can equal a random range as well. And for this, I'm just going to say maybe a minimum of 0.75 seconds and a maximum of 1.25. Okay. So that duration is what we're going to use to animate this. And then we're going to use a simple tween. And the reason I like a tween is because we can kind of fire off this animation. We don't need to create an animation player to do it. We can just animate some of the properties directly. And then the tween has a callback function, meaning a function that we can call when the tween is complete. And we can just use that to do the cue free. So really a tween is ideal for something like this. So let's just define this tween as a new tween just with that create tween method, just like that. And then there's an option I want to turn on, and that's called set parallel. I'm going to go ahead and chain this in here right now and set that to true. And what set parallel does is we're going to tween multiple properties. We're going to tween the position of this damage number, but also we're going to tween the modulate so that we can make it fade out. And if we don't do set parallel true, then what happens is when we define those two tweens, so like right here, we'll tween position, we'll write code to tween the position, and then we're going to write code to tween the modulate. And if the set parallel is set to false, which is the default, then it will execute each tween on an individual basis. So it will first do the tween position because we define that tween first. And then once the position tween is complete, it would then move on to tweening the modulate. Okay. By setting set parallel to true, what it's going to do is it's going to look at all of our tweens here, and it's just going to do them all at the same time in parallel. Okay. Let's first do the tween position. We'll say tween dot, and then we can use this tween property function. Now you can see here the tween property wants an object that we're going to tween, a property that we're going to tween, the final value, and a duration. Okay. So if we start with self, and then the node path to the property is going to be a string. So you can see when I hit comma, it actually started providing me some options here. And we're going to just pick global position, since that's what we kind of set and have worked with. You could just use position as well. I like global position when I don't really know the context of where this might be parented, because then I know that, you know, we're dealing with the global scene as opposed to position as a child of something else. The final value is going to be another position, whereas we set the global position here in this line 8 of our code. Here we have to tell it where should it end up. Okay. What we could do is we can simply just say our global position plus our travel distance, like that. And that's going to give us a new location, right? Based on the travel distance. We're going to say start here and then move this many X and Y. Okay, so we'll go ahead and do that. And then we need a duration. So I'm going to go ahead and just plug in this duration, just like so. And we don't have a great way to test this just yet. And so what I would like to do is I'm going to just treat this as, assume that this is all we want our text to do. We'll just go ahead and finish it by adding this free node part. So what we can do here is say tween dot, and I'm going to say chain. Normally you could just say tween. What we're going to do is add this tween callback. So tween underscore callback. The reason I added this chain is because we set this to parallel, and I actually want this to wait, right? The tween callback. And so by adding this chain, it says, well, even if it's parallel, I still want to do this one after the previous set of tweens. Okay. And so all we need to provide in this tween callback is just this self.queueFree, not redraw. Just like that. Okay. And normally we would have the parentheses, but because this is a callback function, much like signals in Godot, you don't want to put the parentheses in here. Okay. So there we go. So we're going to, once the tween is complete, we're going to queue free ourselves. And that's all we really need to get this started. We'll come back in here and we'll fine tune this tween a little bit, and we'll add the modulate and things like that. But let's go ahead and save this. And I want to move on next to this global script, because we don't yet have a global script to trigger this. So here in my globals, I'm going to create a new script. And I think this global underscore naming convention I've got is a bit redundant, but I'm going to stick with it to keep it consistent. And I'm going to just call this EffectManager, like so. And then I'm going to go straight away to my project settings, globals, and make sure you're on the autoload tab. And then we can just find this script in our globals folder right here. And we can see we've got the path to it. It's recommended the name of global effect manager. I'm going to take global off and just call it effect manager, and I'm going to add it. So there we go. We've now got this script that's going to be an autoload script in our project. So that means, right, as soon as we run it, it'll be there. It'll just always be available. And it'll be available, by the way, under that name of effect manager. Okay. So let's open up the effect manager script. And we don't want to give this, and we can't give an autoload script a class name. because it already kind of has one assigned, EffectManager. Okay, but let's set this up. Now there's not a whole lot we have to do. I'm going to go ahead and expand my global effects and take this damage text scene, and I'm going to click and drag and hold Control or Command if you're on a Mac, and let go. And that's going to give me a constant. It's going to be a preload reference to this scene. Okay, so what that means is our global effect manager is going to preload that scene. It's going to keep it in memory, and at any time it's going to be ready to do something with it. And so now we can create a function, and we'll just call it damage text, like that. Now this damage text, I'm going to go ahead and just finish it off so we get rid of that error. What does this damage text need to do? It needs to be able to be called, right? This is designed so that any script in our project can call this function. And then it's going to create one of these damage texts. So see this start function, how we've got these parameters? We need to get those from somewhere. So I'm going to copy those and I'm going to paste them as arguments on the damage text function as well. So whenever we call this in the global, we'll take these same values and then we can pass them on. And so what we'll do here is we'll create a new instance of our text, of our damage effect, right? So we've got the damage text scene, which this damage text constant, right? This has that script attached. So that's why I'm casting it that way. So we'll just say this equals damage text.instantiate. Okay, so now we're going to create a new instance of our damage text and assign it to this variable _t. And then we can just call add, not CAD, but add child, and just add this scene. Okay, because what that'll do is it'll add it as a child of this global effect manager, which is going to be part of our scene root. And then what we need to do is we need to call that start function that we set up on our damage text. And all we really need to do now is just pass in these two values, the text and the position. And voila, now we have a way to call and create a new damage text. So let's take this full circle, and I want to add this to one of the enemies in my game so you can see how this works. And once we can see it working, then we'll go back and we'll fine tune the damage text. Okay, so this is the part of the tutorial where if you have your own project, you're going to have to just kind of, replicate this kind of work in your own way. But I'm going to find, and for those of you who've been following along, let's just find our enemies folder. And in our enemies folder, we've got a script that we attach to all enemies called enemy.gd. And this script has a take damage function, right? So I'll just find that in my little methods section. And what this take damage does is it's straightforward, right? Whenever the player damages him, it calls this function and it subtracts hit points and things like that. And so all we need to do is add one line of code to this, and now all of our enemies are going to be able to display one of these damage effects. So we'll say EffectManager, because we've got the global or autoload script, dot, we call this damage text is the function. And then we just need to pass in a string that we want to display there, which is the amount of damage, and then a position, okay? And so the string can be, I'm going to go ahead and just create or convert. Actually, I don't like that I had to pass a string in here. I'm going to do this, and it's not going to work real quick. I want to just pass in the damage, right, which is this hurt box damage value, the same value that we used to decrease the hit points right there. And then for the position, I'm going to do this. I'm going to take this enemy's global position, but that's going to spawn it kind of at his feet. So I'm going to give it a little bit of an offset, and I'm going to say plus vector 2. And there's going to be 0 on the X, and we'll put a -36 on the Y. So that'll just bump it up. Okay. Now you can see that it's wanting a string, but I'm passing an int. So let's go back to our effect manager, and I'm going to change this. I'm going to change this altogether. I'm going to call this damage, and I'm going to make it an int so that it's consistent. And then what I'll do here is I'll convert the damage to a string right here. So we'll just say str of _damage. There we go. That way it's a little bit easier to implement, right? Because now if we want to put it on our player or some other place, instead of having to convert to a string in all of these nodes, we'll just pass in the value there. That clears up that error there. And we had this error, but that should be the error we just corrected. So I'm going to go ahead and just run one of the scenes in my game. where we've got some enemies. And if this all worked, I should be able to hit one of these guys. There we go. You saw that one. It was floating off. 5 damage because I just leveled up. And so now I do 5 damage. Because this game is kind of broken in the design right now. One of those goblins is giving us like 50 experience points or something. Okay. So there we go. We've got damage numbers that are flying off. And you can see that they're kind of going in random directions. But they're not super cool yet. So we can kind of dress that up, right? But there you go. Basic implementation complete. So let's go ahead and now and just go back to our damage text. And let's look at this function. How can we improve this, right? So we've already got the tween for the position, which, you know, it seems fine. But I want to show you something. What's one thing that's really nice about tweens is we can add certain properties to them, like easing and transition settings. So right now it's animating in a very linear fashion from point A to point B at a constant speed. And, you know, if we were animating this, we might have it be faster at first and then slow down. And we can actually do that with a tween. So let's go tween dot, and I'm going to say set ease. And I'm going to choose, so you can see there's a couple options here. There's ease in out, ease out in. What ease out is going to do is it's going to adjust the motion so that most of it happens is kind of at the beginning, and then it'll slowly ease out of that motion. So in the case of the movement, it should start faster and end slower. So let's go ahead and just try that one change, and I'm going to run this scene again. And let's hit a goblin. Yeah, not super obvious. Let's try and make some other tweaks to see if we can get a little bit more. We're only animating it for about a second, so we can also add to this this set trans. I'm gonna come down here, and you can see this is referring to a transition type. And now if we set this to something, it'll maybe exaggerate that a little bit. So I'm going to just pick this trans quad. And when we run this scene, that'll adjust the motion a little bit further. Okay, that was a little bit more pronounced, right? It started fast and got quite a bit slower at the end. Like the last moments of the text were really slow. Yeah, and that fits more what I was hoping for. Okay, so if you wanted to adjust or play around with those, you could. There's different transitions in here. And for fun, maybe let's play with a few of these things. So I'm going to just delete this and type tween dot. And it's showing me the wrong thing. Here we go. Trowns. We've got bounce and circular and cubic, elastic. Let's just show you this bounce one as an example. And then you can experiment on your own. But you could also look these up to kind of see. You saw that how that number was bouncing? That might be really handy for certain things. For a short duration animation like this, and with that ease, it kind of looks a little bit goofy, but you see how it kind of went past the point and bounced. Okay, there we go. So you could use a different transition type to get a different effect. All right, I'm going to go ahead and just set this back to that quad that I chose because I like that one, and I like this motion transition now. We just need to modulate it. So let's go ahead and say tween.tween property. And because, remember, we've set these in parallel, this other tween will happen at the same time. So self is what we want to tween. And here we want to tween the modulate. So I'm going to just start typing that. There we go, modulate. And the value we want to tween towards is going to be a color. So we can just type color. And then in parentheses, we can put the values for our color. And I want it to just be white, so that it doesn't change the color of my number. And let's say you had made your damage text yellow, you still want to make the modulate color white, because the modulate is not so much the color you want it to become as it is the color you want to use to affect. So what we're going to tween to is white, but with an alpha value of 0. So it's fully transparent. Okay. And then we will also modulate this over the duration, just like we did with this tweening the position. So now if we run our scene, the number should fade out. There we go. And there we go. I mean, we could probably call that good now if we wanted to. But I'm going to go ahead and just look at this real quick. And I want to show you something. One thing that we can do is, let's say we want the ease to be different on this one ease. We could go dot. And just like we called the set ease on the tween, we could call it on this tween property. So we could say set ease, and then we could pick a different one. So maybe for this fade, we want to use the ease in, okay? Which is kind of the opposite of an ease out, right? So let's see what that looks like. Okay, there we go. Now, the reason why that looks nicer to me, I think, is because instead of easing most of the transition at the beginning, like we did with an ease out, where it goes fast and then it slows down, ease in is going to go fast, or it's going to go slow. It's going to slowly animate, and then towards the end of the animation, it's going to boop. Okay, so let's just look at that again. So the numbers are kind of moving slow at first, and then, or they're moving kind of fast at first, and then they're fading slow, moving. Oh my gosh. I can't talk right now, guys. So the numbers are moving fast in their position and then slowing down the movement, but they're not beginning their fade as much until towards the end, which gives it a nice kind of opposite effect. So you can see the number, it seems fully visible for a little bit, and then eventually fades out. And then I think there's one last thing I want to do with this, and then you guys can experiment. And let me just demonstrate this little issue we've got. Oh no, that did not work because I took damage. Let me come in here and try this again. The damage numbers, I think, are going to be potentially below the player. So let's just go ahead and look at this and test it. Yeah, he saw that it kind of went under his feet. There it was behind him. Let's make sure that doesn't happen, because the damage text should always be on top. So that's just one setting. We should come in here to our damage text scene, select our root node, and then just come to ordering, and we'll set the Z index to something high. You could set it to higher than 1. In fact, I might set 10. Now, when we go ahead and run our level and test it out, if I can do this successfully, then damage number should be on top. There we go. So we've successfully created a really easy to use damage number, and hopefully you see how this could be used to queue up other kinds of effects in your world. You know, like again, maybe when you're moving around, you want to like spawn a dust particle, and you want anybody to be able to do it, and it's kind of a pain to build that in, especially if you decide to change the particle or to add the ability to have different particles if you're on different terrain. Well, shoot, now if you put that on your enemy and on your player and on blah, 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 you know, you've got like 20 things to change. But by building it this way where it's modular, you just had to add that simple function call to our, in this case, our enemy when he took damage. And now if we change our damage number, as you can see, every enemy gets the change. Okay, so it's a really nice modular way to handle this. So thanks for following along with this tutorial. If you're new to my channel and you want to see more, go ahead and check out this action RPG tutorial series and subscribe so that you can see what's coming next. And I want to give a special shout out and thanks to all of my Patreon supporters, whose names will be rolling in the credits in just a moment. And as always, we'll see you next time.